the policy for Birth and Color RVA. This meeting is going to be recorded. It's a webinar. I will ask folks who are not part of the panel to please stay on mute and also keep yourselves off camera so we can make sure to highlight our wonderful guests. Today's conversation will be between Candace Maternal, our Executive Director, Latrice Ayers, former delegate and Senate candidate, Delegate King, who's also running, and Jennifer Carroll Foy as well. And I'm not sure if I see Jennifer Carroll Foy, but I do know that Delegate King is running a couple minutes late. So we will get, okay, wonderful. She's in the waiting room. Okay. So Chelsea is letting folks in the waiting room as fast as she can. So here's hoping. I'm going to pass the mic along to Candace Maternal to get us started. Hi. Hello. All right, Kenda, the mic is yours.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for participating and coming out to watch our panel, just so we can learn a little bit more about the landscape within Virginia when it comes to Black maternal health and reproductive justice. So is everyone here before I continue? Are we waiting for Delegate King or not?
I believe we are not. She said she would be a few minutes late.
Okay.
And for those on the, if you click your view button and you click on show only video participants, those folks will be the ones shown. So if you are not on the panel, if you can get yourself off video, we will get started.
All right, perfect. So in the newest report of the Maternal Mortality Review Team, which will come out soon for the public, the numbers are really disturbing when it comes to Black mothers. The following data is taken directly from the report. And you will actually be able to have that. We will send it out as soon as we get notice that we can provide it to everyone. Between 2018 and 2020, the pregnancy-associated death rate has increased from 37.1 to 86.6 per 100,000 live births. The pregnancy-associated death rate more than doubled from 2018 to 2020. So it seems like we are moving backwards and not forwards in this issue in Virginia. Although we've implemented a lot of things, especially with the previous administration. We had a lot of things that was targeting and helping the maternal mortality outcome, but it seems like we are going backwards and we need to think of some new ways to really target the issue. Black women experience higher rates of pregnancy-associated deaths when compared to white counterparts. Black women continue to have higher rates of pregnancy-associated deaths compared to their white counterparts at rates of 89.5 versus 53.5. Black women are more likely to die from cardiac disorders, cancers, and the expiration of chronic illnesses or in other races. So when you think about the pandemic only showed itself from what community organizations have always said. And so we have to really think about what does this truly mean? It means that we are actually failing, and we are failing our mothers generally, and especially when it comes to Black mothers. And so we have to really think about what solutions can we talk about, can we discuss that publicly can be done as far as legislative, but also different things that providers can also implement within their practices. And so I'm going to turn it over to Galina.
Hi, folks. So since we have two amazing legislators who worked so hard on some of these issues, I wanted to ask you all, what have been the impediments that you found while working with your legislature in getting some of the more potentially effective solutions off the ground when it comes to pushing for legislative change?
You want to go first, Asheris, or
Got it.
okay? Okay, well, I guess I could take a stab at it. Um, I can tell you that some of the biggest impediments that I found was just a lack of empathy. What you find is that people come into the General Assembly with their own set of lived experiences. And when you have a body that is mainly made up of people who are of privilege and wealth and, you know, not from any of the minority classes, then I can tell you that there are people who will reach on the other side and say, you know what, I want to be a good partner and ally. Because while I have no personal lived experience about these challenges, I identify that it is an issue and I want to work with you to address it. But then you have others who believe that this is hyperbolic, that we are being alarmist, that we are just, making a mountain out of a molehill. But at the end of the day, statistics are clear. The data shows that in the wealthiest country in the world, in one of the richest states in the nation, that women, especially Black women, are dying at third world country rates. And these are preventable, it's avoidable. And I have to say that the lack of empathy is one of the biggest challenges, because some people have to identify and address the fact that some of this relates to implicit bias. But for you to want to address and encounter implicit bias, you have to admit that there are bias in the first place. But we all have bias, it's innate, right? We just can't be blinded by it and move forward. We have to address it in a real way, because the studies also show that doctors and OBGYNs and nurse practitioners, white specifically, just believe that Black people endure pain differently. We are not believed, we are not seen, and we're not heard. And once we start addressing that in a real way, we can have more evidence-based solutions to address this. So I know for me, it's just getting people to really care about the issue. Black moms are dying, Black children are dying, and it's not necessary. And I just want to thank everyone on this call. I want to thank Birth in Color. I want to thank Candy and LaSharice and Jennifer McCullen and all of the amazing people who've been working specifically on this issue. Galena, Repo Rising, all of the amazing groups who've come together and say, our voices will be heard. We're going to stand loud and proud, and we're going to address this and agitate until something is done. But the answer is the lack of empathy for me.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and jump in. I also want to extend my appreciation to Birth in Color for hosting this critical conversation today. Again, I am LaSharice Aird, and I'm thrilled to have served in the House of Delegates previously working on this issue. And I know we've been given the warning, no electioneering on this call, but I'll just say looking forward to hopefully in 18 days being granted the ability to work on this further in the state Senate. As it pertains to what I consider to be the barriers and the impediments in the way the best way I can describe it is going back to probably about 2018. During my time in the House, I can recall going to speak with the chair at that time of the Appropriations Committee, and that is the committee that is responsible for funding the Commonwealth's obligations. And when I tried to describe the interest in providing additional funding for data collection around infant and maternal mortality rates, the response, hold your breath, was, but I thought you all didn't care about babies. And so, not to be political, but that is a true story. That is what the leader of the committee that is responsible for providing funding said to me with a straight face at that time. And so that really is just the clearest way I can describe to you the largest impediment, which is that understanding and education, particularly in the political realm. There is such a lack of understanding around what maternal health is, what maternal and infant mortality is, and why there are rates of Black and Brown women dying higher than anyone else in Virginia at this time, and what the legislature's responsibility is to try and provide solutions for this. Fast forward to we were able to get funding in that original request. But what I learned from the practitioners and the state agencies through VDH that have a role in actually executing on that data collection is there was a need to revisit what data are we actually collecting, who's collecting this data, and what happens to it once its collection is complete. And so that's a very different story than what we have right now, just even having a report coming out. But a lot of times the Commonwealth is collecting data, but it's not being disseminated to the necessary people so that it can be utilized and leveraged in practice. And as practitioners are making decisions about how they should do things differently, whether they should do things differently, and understanding those coming before them. And so I would still say I'm glad that there's a report coming out. I can't wait to see it. But that collection of data and the use of that data, particularly by the Commonwealth and legislators, is step one to understanding strategies and solutions moving forward. The other thing I will mention is funding. All of these recommendations to combat this crisis is centered around the Commonwealth providing support and resources to providers, to those in this space that are providing community care, both those in vulnerable positions and not. And it can't be done without money. You want to know what a state cares about? Look at their budget. And it has been some progress that we've had to get the funding that has been allocated to date, but it's not enough. And we know that just based on what Kenda has led with, and that we are still seeing our rates climb. And so for me, I'm going to go and say that the data collection, the data dissemination, and the funding are our biggest impediments that we still need to overcome moving forward.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to join you all. I'm Delegate Candy Munden King. I represent Prince William and Stafford County in the Virginia House of Delegates. Thank you so much to Birth and Color for this important conversation. In terms of challenges, I am very fortunate to get to serve in the footsteps of Delegate Aird and Delegate Carol Foy, who've been fighting for maternal health measures. And part of that is my service on the Maternal Health Data and Quality Task Force. Delegate Aird is correct. Soon to be senator is correct. The way we collect data, especially as it relates to low-income families, is one of the biggest challenges we have to overcome in terms of addressing maternal mortality. And that is one of the biggest challenges, the way we collect data from low-income families. But the other is the attitude towards the importance of data in our current elected environment. We are pushing so hard for more data, for more quality data, effective data collection, the application of data, but we're pushing against a system that is really comfortable just kicking the can down the road. And so where we see the maternal health death and just terrible outcomes is often in rural communities where their representatives have all the power to make the changes. And so I think we have to overcome this attitude that data is unnecessary, that it can't save lives. We've seen it with HIV research. We've seen it with cancer research. We have seen it with sickle cell anemia research, which there's a cross-section with maternal health as well. We've seen the power of data, and we have to get those in those rural communities who are impacted the most by the current state of our maternal health system. We have to get them to change their attitudes on the importance of data as well.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your answers. I took myself off camera, and that seems to be a little bit unstable. I hope you hear me. As Black women in Virginia legislators, what do you see as your biggest and most immediate priorities?
Galina, could you repeat that? You went out just a little bit in the middle of that question.
The
Sure.
question.
Let me actually pop that into the chat as well. As Black women in Virginia and as legislators, what do you see as the biggest and most immediate needs to take in this coming session?
I'm happy to jump in there. I think I got the question that time. I don't know if I'm getting old or is my hearing going, what is going on? But I think I got the gist of the question, which is the biggest challenge in the upcoming session. I am so excited. I think there are 40 Black women running or some number that was unheard of when I was a kid growing up in Virginia. To a large number of Black women bringing so many lived experiences as well as expertise, technical expertise to the General Assembly. So there are a lot of things I think next session that are important. For me, will be the focus on access to contraceptives and protecting reproductive health in Virginia, protecting access to abortion care, to all the things that women need. That's something that I'm looking forward to tackling with my future Senate colleagues with the Contraception Equity Act, as well as safeguarding Virginia's current abortion standard, because we have just come to, and I'll just be completely honest with you. I tell people this all the time. If I come to this abortion and this reproductive freedom conversation so reluctantly, because I don't think there's ever been a pregnancy test that I wasn't like, yay, another one and another one and another one. But that's not the reality for all families in Virginia, and Black women in particular who face complications, who need abortion care. They shouldn't have to worry about whether their politician approves. It should be a conversation between them and their doctor. And so I think that those are the battles we will have to protect over the next few years to protect the work that's already been done.
I'm just going to jump in and say I join Candy in being excited because I strongly believe that when you have Black women in elected office, it's supposed to look different. It's supposed to feel different. It's supposed to sound different. And it shows up in our policy and in our legislation. And it has for as long as I have been in office, right? And so the one thing that we don't often talk about, and that it will be a broken record on, as we talk about reproductive health and reproductive justice, is that this issue is intrinsically linked to all the other issues. When we start to think about our schools and education, when we start to think about housing accessibility and affordability in our communities, the environment that you may possibly have to raise someone in, and whether or not it's environmentally safe from an environmental justice standpoint. Is the community safe? You know, can I afford? All of these things are intrinsically linked, particularly for Black women, when we talk about reproductive access and reproductive justice. And so it's hard to give you even one or two things that are going to be top priorities. But for me, in addition to the fight that we have to codify access to an abortion in the Constitution, I will also be focused on our schools and education, because there is a war being waged by some members in elected roles against our schools. And quite frankly, that is the great equalizer. And so if we don't have equity there, if we don't have resources there, especially in Black and Brown communities, that is also intrinsically linked to power. This is about a fight of who has power and who does not. And so I'm trying not to be political. I'm so sorry, Kendall. I'm working really hard right now to temper my words. But if individuals who are targeting and attacking our public schools are not stopped, then that will lead to a greater problem and a greater issue overall. So I'm going to say education, every level is going to be top of my list. But the list is long, y'all.
Okay, so I'm gonna say I'm not looking forward to working with any of you, to be honest. Well, listen, we're gonna have such a good time. It's gonna be a whole vibe. The energy is just gonna be, ubiquitous throughout the General Assembly. People are not gonna know what to do with themselves, because when I tell you we have some passionate, dynamic, phenomenal folks coming to the General Assembly who are there to represent their communities and to be true voices and will not be bossed or bought. I mean, that's what this is, and it's really, really exciting. But to answer the question, I mean, just like these two wonderful ladies said, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what our scope will be, or to narrow it, because it's so intersectional. I mean, we have a lot of work to do. We have to decriminalize abortion. Access to abortion care should be nowhere near our criminal code. So we have to make sure that that is not a reality. We have to continue to destigmatize abortion. I think that this group of candidates have done very well to not tapping around the issue. They are unabashed in saying the word abortion and leaning in on that, and that abortion care is health care. And so I think that that is something that was lacking previously, that you had some people who would quibble about, abortion, and they would want to say just reproductive health care. But it's not that. It's about people having unfettered access to decide when, if, and how they start a family and what that looks like. We also need to eliminate the crisis pregnancy centers in Virginia. We still have them, and they continue to give out misinformation to people who are seeking answers to their questions, in order to steer people away from, having an abortion if they so choose. And I think that they plant themselves in lower socioeconomic communities of color, which I take tremendous issue with. And so making sure we focus on them and eliminate as many of these crisis pregnancy centers is extremely important. Investing in critical maternal health care as well, because it does start before before anything. People have to have access to preventative care. They have to have access to just good quality, affordable health care. And to invest in critical maternal health care, I think, is extremely important. And what I am most excited to see is the big focus on reproductive justice. Because even though you have the right to abortion, it doesn't matter if you don't have access. But access doesn't just mean having, a planned pregnancy or center or anything like that near you. It's also about having the right to not have a child and what that looks like. And everyone should have access to clean air and water, that if they decide to have children, that they can go to safe schools and live in safe communities, and people have body autonomy. And what does that mean? I mean, we have to continue to push on the fact that the majority of Virginia voters believe that politicians should not interfere in a patient's private medical decisions. So carrying that flag and focusing on these issues, I mean, I think that this is what this new assembly will take very seriously. And I'm excited to help usher in some good legislation to do just that.
So turning it back over to Kenda, what else would you like to see during this upcoming legislative session as Birth and Color's executive director?
Give us the laundry list.
Oh, and the list is very long, especially this year. Every time someone asks me, it's like, oh, what's your policy? And I'm just like, well, it's a long list. Like, I can email you the list because it's very long. But I love what all of you all said when we talk about reproductive justice and what that means. Because if you actually take the reproductive justice framework, it's going to intersect all of these things. It's not just Black maternal health. It's not just environment, clean energy. It's not just the education in the schools. It's about juvenile justice also. It's about marijuana justice. It's about all of these different things that we have to start looking at. What does this truly mean? What's actually truly happening? And I think if we come to Black maternal health with our RJ framework and take it from that point of view and focus on what solutions can be put in play, it will actually definitely change the outcomes when it comes to that as well. Because you have to think about, if cardiovascular is one of the number one things, what stress levels are Black women actually going through and what's actually truly happening to them? And also when we have to think about education when it comes to the OBs as well, and midwives, all providers, because if a Black mom comes in and she has a cardiovascular issue, that OB is not targeting that cardiovascular issue because they're afraid of it. That is not their specialty. So how can we figure out something where providers have to really connect and talk to each other, because that's one of the main reasons also is like, I'm seeing this OB for this specific issue of pregnancy, but they're going to refer me to a cardiovascular doctor if they even refer me and not patch me up. So what does that truly look like in that communication between those two providers? Are we going to discuss what medications are safe and what this client should be doing from both sides? Or are we just going to say, hey, client, you need to navigate that yourself? But then that's what has been previously happening is the moms get blamed for their outcome and not really, well, I'm going to y'all doctors and this is what's really happening. So can you tell me what are we doing? And then when you look at like, how do we tailor MCOs to not use, it's great that they have case management within their organizations, but can we actually have case managers back on the ground? I think too much technology is being used instead of like going back to the roots and going back to the ground to target a lot of these issues. So how can we effectively invest in community-based organizations who do most of the work, who collect most of the great data? How can we provide data that still remains our data, but having it reviewed on the task force as well? Why is the Maternal Mortality Review Task Force, why does that not have a community-based organization on there who actually deal with moms, who can actually say, well, from the community standpoint, this mom could have been targeted this way and this could have been changed this outcome? Because sometimes when you look at, and you have a lot of providers that look at it from a scientific standpoint and not really all the time as a like, okay, what could have been done differently just from a common sense point of view? And so when we think about legislation from that viewpoint, my question is, what common sense legislation could actually be implemented that's really not too deep, but it is deep enough to where we can actually get it passed? Because I remember my best session was with you all. When we had to stand up on the floor and answer the crazy questions from legislators. And so even though this isn't political, you still have to think about the legislators that you're providing and that you're voting for at the end of the day. And so my team will probably like fuss at me later, but at the end of the day, like, these are the legislators that you actually have that are making these decisions. And I remember I had to stand there beside both of you to explain what a doula was, why it was important, and even when it came to breastfeeding. So when you think about, I had a conversation with one of a person from the administration. And one of the things that they've said, like, okay, we don't have anybody that's coming into healthcare that's going to be in the legislation. Like, what are we going to do with that? And my rebuttal was, do we actually need somebody from healthcare to come into this? Because sometimes when we have people who we know that has been in healthcare that's served, they're told they forgot their Hippocratic oath because they're voting against abortion and reproductive health, but that's what you fight for and you're an OB. So even those type of frameworks is like, okay, sometimes legislators are focused on who's bringing the most money to my campaign versus what are my people really truly saying.
Oh, excellent points. I know we have only half an hour to go, and I have so many questions, but one of the things that kind of turning back to some of the things that you all have talked about abortion and abortion being under attack, we've seen a significant influx of folks coming from other states into Virginia for reproductive health care from states where termination of pregnancy is no longer possible or legal. And we've also seen a lot of attacks, like criminal law attacks on providers, on people who are helping patients, and on the patients themselves. How do you think we should safeguard folks in Virginia from these kinds of attacks? Do you think there's a role for the legislature in that? And what are some of the things that you're hearing or seeing on that issue?
Yeah, I'll just say that my first response is this is not hard, right? So like, we have seen for a while now the attacks that have been launched against providers and facilities in which they are practicing in. And surprisingly, a number of states, not in Virginia, have put measures to keep them safe in place really quickly. At least 15 states have, to include California, Colorado, and a number of other states on the east, up and down the East Coast, even including, surprisingly, North Carolina. And so Virginia can do better in doing simple things like making sure that people don't feel like they can get away with bringing harm to individual utilizing facilities, healthcare environments, and that they can harass and or bring harm to physicians and healthcare staff that are working in these locations. And so just to offer a few examples, some of what I've seen happen in other states that we could easily implement here in Virginia include putting regulations in place that prohibit you from blocking entrances to these facilities, prohibiting threatening and intimidation of staff, for providing any type of reproductive health care or any of the patients entering facilities, prohibiting property damage to facilities to include graffiti and just any type of damage, extending that to telephone harassment, and also just listing out excessive noise and any other things that can just make you feel intimidated and or unsafe and or not protected if you are someone who is seeking to have access to this level of care both inside and outside. And I think those are very common sense, very basic, and are just like, if we are serious about saying we want to ensure people have access, let's start with making sure they feel safe, even going to obtain this access.
So I think that we have to be very brutally honest also about the attacks on healthcare professionals. So we have, a governor who has promised to criminalize doctors. Well, then you have the brain drain that you see in places like Louisiana and other places where you have all of this great medical staff leaving because the political environment has made their life's work very difficult and dangerous to do. So I think we have to protect healthcare providers. I am also extremely concerned about what we see in some towns that are using zoning ordinances and approvals to attack doctors and their work. Or you can't provide this service here, you can't do that here. This is a pro-life sanctuary that is okay with women bleeding to death or dying while they wait for doctors and their lawyers to decide if they can receive health care. So I think we really have to look at ways to address those people who are misusing zoning ordinances. And I think we have to do more, and we can talk about this a little later, the overarching status quo of healthcare providers, their mental health, their pay, their quality of life. We can't get the best and what we deserve if the people who are overwhelmingly women are not getting what they need to be the best at what they do.
I think for me, it's, we have messaging bills, and then we have bills that we're going to really fight to get done because it really can pass. And so the makeup of the General Assembly is going to play, a part in that. And we're looking and exploring, but, what we want to do going into this next legislative session. And the thing I look forward to the most is working with the stakeholders, working with the administration, working with as many folks as possible to see where we can move the ball forward, right? And what that looks like. Because, we could talk about, certain things, but the reality is what it is. And I know that, we hope campaigning is over and politics don't play a part, but some people, it's top of mind. How am I going to message this after this legislative session? And it's really unfortunate, but we have to operate within the reality that we're given. So I know that there are things that we can get done, and I look forward to having roundtable discussions with all of our stakeholders and the folks who are interested in moving this issue forward and figuring out what it looks like for this upcoming legislative session, which is quickly approaching.
Yes, it is. So to Kenda, kind of piggybacking back on all of that, what are some of the additional barriers that you're seeing in your work, that folks are having to accessing reproductive health care, including abortion care, that Black women and our trans and non-binary community face in this current state of affairs that we're in?
So for me, a lot of times clients will come in and they'll talk about like the provider not really listening to what they have to say or not believing the things that they're saying is going on within their body. We have to fight a lot. A lot of times I have to like be the person that calls the hospital to say like, oh, we have this person that's in the ER. She has this, she's postpartum. She has all of these things actually happening within her body, and it could potentially be a blood clot. I mean, I know I'm not medical, but this is what the symptoms are showing. So can you actually pull her back? And so that has been one of the things that I'm like, what do people do who don't have birth and color doulas? Like, what does that really truly look like? Because if they're already experiencing that and they have a doula, and like I still have to go back and call the hospital and like pull all the cards of the providers that I do know so that they can grab the people or go follow the chart. That's really what's major at the top of my list. Also, I have a large focus on the fathers also, and people don't even think about how fathers can actually change the game when it comes to maternal mortality also. And so when those fathers are going to the doctor's offices and they have questions, they're not even being answered. They're not even being acknowledged that they are a part of this process as well. And
Why do
so
you think that is?
I'm sorry, say that again. And so sometimes people don't think about that scope and like why it's so difficult for fathers to be present. And so a little bit about what we do is we make sure that they are prepared, they know what questions to ask, and they have my direct number. The fathers have more access to me than other people, because if they call me and say, hey, I went to the doctor's office and this doctor just completely ignored me, then we're showing them how to file grievances. We're showing them how to show up in that space so that they can be a part of the process. And then also making sure that they know the signs and symptoms to look for when it comes to postpartum depression, because maternal mental health is a real thing also. And so when you think about all of those things, it's like, all right, what can actually truly be done? We've done so much in the previous sessions of like changing the game, making them really say like Black maternal mortality is a real issue. We've created the task force, but then there's people that say things like when we wanted to do the fetal infant mortality review. Now we have legislators that are afraid that they're going to tie in some type of way abortion, so we can't even carry the bills that we know need to be carried because there's so much where either you're afraid or whether you're vocal or whether you're not. And so how can we really balance that out? Because we know that abortion is at stake. We know that our governor has already said that they're going to put $1.5 billion into an abortion ban, which is the craziest thing ever. Because if we have $1.5 billion to put to an abortion ban, and you mean to tell me that you can't provide funding for community-based organizations, for doulas, for community health workers, for home visiting programs, so where are you getting the money from? Because this is not making sense to me as a person who's just outside of birth and color, just a person who lives in Virginia. So are we really that don't want people to have abortions that much that we're going to put that money there for campaigns and not really put it to really help solutions like this? That makes no sense to me. And so when we think about that, and then let alone we can't even go into the schools and tell females, people who identify as females, about their menstrual cycles, what's going to happen, the real things that sex education needs to be, not some watered down stuff. Then when we think about what laws can we actually put into place that say, no, we want schools to have real sex education, because that's one of the things that's leading maternal mortality also, that no one is talking about the youth. They're not prepared to have babies. They don't understand the concepts. They just think like they're just being told don't have sex. So you telling me not to have sex is like, okay, what's so fabulous about sex that you're telling me not to have it? Because now I want to go have sex and I don't know how to prepare for it because the schools don't want me to learn about it. So now I'm learning from my friend who just had a baby, who still doesn't know how to put a condom on, who still doesn't know that you need to take the air out of the condom to actually have it on. All of those things like that, those are real issues that are really common sense issues, but there's so much divide that the common sense things don't really make it to legislation because we're either afraid that they're going to tag this onto this, or so how do we get away from actually being afraid of what the other sides are going to do to a bill to still be able to carry this bill through? That's my question.
Tell them how you really feel, Kendra.
Huh?
Tell them how you really feel.
You know, it's just like one of those things. It's like, okay, a lot of this is not really making sense to me. And I remember last year's session where we had to fight every single abortion ban. We had to fight it. And then I really got upset with legislators who said that, oh, we can't carry the infant fetal mortality review bill because they're going to put abortion in it some type of way. I was really, truly upset because Black women's children die more before the age of 1 than any other people. And we're still worried about abortion. So I think when we talk about abortions, yes, that is important, but also making sure that we're talking about all of the other issues, because abortion is just one sector of reproductive justice. It's only a sector of it. And so when we can educate from a real point of view of not really just educating about abortion, but educating about reproductive justice in general and how abortions are really called all these other things that people don't even know. So I think when we come to panels, we need to start educating too about what is really considered an abortion in the state of Virginia. Like me losing a baby is, and I have to go get a DNC, that is considered an abortion. So when we want to unite the community to say like, no, abortion matters, those are ways that we can actually do it because people don't understand that. And so when we're thinking about all of these things, like those are things that we really need to think about, and how are we actually going to do it this session. So I'm super excited that I have 2 of my people really coming back. Like, I am super excited. I know that I'm probably not even supposed to say this, but they're both running. I'm super excited because we can actually truly get some stuff done when it comes to my work and the whole legacy of Birth in Color.
And Ken, I know this isn't like a specific question, but I think, the other half of the legislative and the policy side of the conversation is really empowering mothers, empowering women, empowering people who care about this issue. Because the one thing that people in office are responsive to is pressure from their constituents. And so in the same way we have normalized the conversation around reproductive rights, we need to normalize the conversation around maternal health. Because the one thing I hear from women and constituents is that they're suffering in silence. Number one, from the education standpoint, they don't know that these resources and that these ways they can receive help are still out there. We still have a lot of work to do on that front, but then demanding that this is an everyday part of the platform that their leaders are focused on and are working to fight towards and will advocate for, has to be the new mandate, especially if it's affecting us and we want to see change. And so I'm excited about trying to get people in a position where they feel empowered to take part in this conversation too.
And I would just like to add, the holistic approach is the best approach, right? Because we are multifaceted and there's so many things that impact our decisions, our health, and therefore, whether we make decision to have the abortion or if we decide to have children and what that looks like. And so, having legislation or bills that we put forward to, make breast milk covered by private health insurance. I mean, it may even be something similar to other states are doing. If you have a diagnosis of infertility, that has to be covered by insurance, right? Because there are people who have, those type of diagnoses, and honestly, health insurance doesn't cover it. And so now you're talking about classism because only a particular group of people can afford $30,000 for IVF to be able to have a family. I mean, there's so many directions that this can go in. And should go in, because we have to think about people again, holistically. And even now, I'm excited to say that, everyone here played an enormous part in ensuring that we expanded Medicaid to almost 700,000 Virginians. But at the end of the day, probably about 20-30% of those people are about to lose their health insurance, right? But that's because they now have private health insurance, now because they're going to be evaluated for income requirements and they're going to be kicked off. Their address changed. And all their information is going to be sent to the wrong address. So therefore, they don't know that they have to reapply and get reevaluated so they can get approved, and they will be dropped off. So that is going to be a huge issue that's quickly approaching that not that many people are talking about. And families are going to be severely impacted when someone gets hurt, injured, or sick, and they go to the hospital and told that you don't have health insurance. So now some serious decisions have to be made. So there's a lot of work that we have to do. And, I applaud, this panel for bringing it to, forefront, everyone's, top of mind, that we have to start thinking of these things intersectionally and holistically, and how we're going to address all of these issues that so many pregnant people have to address.
Agreed. And I feel like I'm probably the only Black woman in Virginia that doesn't watch football. So I'm going to get this reference probably wrong, but I think it's called offense and defense. We have to play offense and defense. We have to defend the progress that so many folks have already made and just get through these next two darkest of dark years as it relates to reproductive health and Black women's lives and our ability to raise children who love themselves and can learn about themselves in school and who are proud of themselves and proud of their Commonwealth. It's difficult, and we're going to spend some time playing defense, making sure that we're protecting the progress, because let's be honest, the biggest enemies of our health have been working and waiting for 40, 50 years for their moment to get their way. And we have to defend that. And then we have to elevate what we're doing to make sure we're reaching everyone in our community who needs access to care and support.
Thank you all. I will say you've tackled a lot of the questions I was going to ask, which is amazing and very predictable for this group of folks. But I will ask, kind of, as we're running up on 10 minutes left. In this world right now where abortion has taken such a precedence, right, because of the unprecedented attacks on reproductive health care, and all of these other issues don't make up as much in the news or within the world of electoral politics. How do you see kind of your role in raising these issues more, in raising the profile of these issues more publicly? How do we all, as advocates, as all of the many folks who are on this call, make sure that this stuff does not fall through the cracks and does not get relegated to like something over there that's not as politically, successful or important? So that's my question to you all.
Yeah, I think I've had the displeasure of spending a few years in the minority party in the House of Delegates. And when you don't have
just you started in the minority.
So when you don't have the votes, what you have is your voice. And I can tell sometimes it brings me great joy. I know when my name is called on, here she goes. But somewhere you have to know that someone is watching who wants their story to be told, who wants to be heard, who wants people to understand that even though people may have other priorities, they may have differences of experience, that their story matters, that their health journey is important. And so we have to use our voice and continue to raise our voices. We also have to find unlikely opportunities to call out hypocrisy. I remember being in a committee and there was a Republican who had a bill to create a very small, in my opinion, tax incentive to help those families who lose babies and have to, we, the Commonwealth of Virginia, require them to do certain things for burial. And this Republican-led initiative was killed by a Republican majority on the committee. And I'm here, the only person in support of it, because when I was knocking doors in the middle of the pandemic, I met women who lost their babies and who had to go through that process. And it was a pandemic, and it was a lack of doctors and support people, and no one knew what was happening, and they were alone. And the very least, I felt, it wasn't my bill, it wasn't my idea, but at the very least, I felt that it was important to give honor to their stories and their experiences, and to call out the hypocrisy of the so-called pro-life who just killed something to help the living mothers, fathers, siblings, and families who are grappling with the devastation of pregnancy loss. And so we have to continue to raise our voices. We have to call out the hypocrisy, make friends where we can, but don't be afraid to lose a few friends on either side if you have to.
Yes. So before y'all two answer the question, so everybody on the call, let me show you how powerful your voice can actually be. Because I love that stillbirth tax credit, and we carried one last year, right? And there was people who was like, we're not going to vote for the tax credit. And I was talking to this lady, and we did a whole research, and I was like, okay, but you voted for this tax credit, you voted for this tax credit, so why aren't you voting for this tax bill? And she told me to my face, was like, I don't care what you say, and I'm done with the conversation. So I said, you do realize that you're up for re-election this year. And she goes, and you think that you don't even live in my area. And I said, okay, watch what happens. And so guess who was not reelected? Because we made it public that, okay, you didn't want to vote for our stillbirth bill. You didn't think that it mattered. So let us show you the power that the actual people really truly have. And so when we have forums like this is really what we want people to really gain from it, is to like use the power of your voice as well. Because I'm always the one that people are like, oh my God, here she goes, even though I'm not on the legislative floor, because I'm going to truly stand up for what I want and what I know the community wants and what they actually truly need. Because one of the things about us is we don't operate without asking the community, do they want something first? And so I was so excited on the day of election, and they did the polling, and I saw that person, and everybody else like, oh my God, that's so sad. And I was just like, I'm so happy, because now maybe we will get a tax bill, but she'll also listen to what her community is actually saying that they actually truly need. So I'll pass it over to y'all two now.
I mean, that felt like a mic drop to me. The only thing I'll add is that I think that legislators have the power of convening and accountability, right? And so the thing that we can use our voice and put our voice to action in is bringing along all the partners, along all the individuals who are affected in the community, and to make sure we are not just acting in isolation solely on what we think is best, but that we have been given this recommendation from the people who are actually in the field putting these things to work. And so that convening ability is quite powerful. But furthermore, the one thing about state agencies that are also responsible for executing on some of this work is they can outlive politicians. They are bureaucrats. They are in these entities, and they have oftentimes been there longer than people who come in and out of the office, longer than people who come in and out of administrations. And even though sometimes you pass policy, they will sit on that policy and decide when they want to execute on it and how it gets executed. And so we have a responsibility to hold those folks accountable and make sure that when we move something forward, it's actually moving and it's actually implemented in the way we intended for it to be.
I have not that much to add. People should feel secure knowing that these are the people that you're sending down to Richmond, right? I mean, I can speak for the women on this call. I mean, we are moms, right? We are working moms because we all got jobs. And we're full-time right now campaigners who will be full-time elected officials. So we understand the struggles because it's our lived experience as well, right? We've had to make the tough decisions that everyday Virginians have had to make. So when we go down there, we not only have our marching orders, we know our family struggles, our personal lived experiences, and we're bringing all of that to bear. So when you talk about some of the most compelling arguments, it's really personal stories and testimonies, which we have. So we move different, we argue different, our purpose is different. There's a sense of urgency when you see the people who are going to be coming down to General Assembly, especially specifically the women on this call, is because we get it, right? We get it. And I think that speaks for itself, like in what we carry, how we move, how we lobby, how we advocate, how we get things done, and the seriousness in which we take our business. Because we're not in it for the title, we're not in it for the pay because there isn't any. We're in this because we understand the struggle and we want to make it better for our children, your children, and everyone who comes behind us. So that's the thing I'm most excited about. You know, I don't have to convince women like the women on this call or some of the people that's coming on the General Assembly to do the right thing, because they're down there for a purpose and we're all on a mission. And I'm really excited about that.
Wonderful. And I'm going to just round this call out a little bit. So if folks who are on it, if you are interested in working with us on all of these important issues, if you would like to come into these legislators' offices, who we will hopefully see in coming in January, and talk to them more about these issues and get some of these things moving forward, please go on our website, birthandcolorrva.org, and sign up to be a part of our listserv, and we will send you information, and we will have a legislative advocacy day in January. I believe it is January 24th, where we will come out and see all of you, hopefully. And before that, we will be, of course, updating folks on our legislative priorities. And generally speaking, no matter who you vote for, go out and vote your values. Make sure that you are registered, make sure that you are, you know where your district is, make sure what you know what you're doing. And if you have any questions, there are wonderful organizations, including New Virginia Majority, August Virginia, and us. You can ask us any questions you have about any of that. And with that, I'm going to give Kenda the last 2 minutes for the last few words, and then we will conclude the call.
So I really don't have much to say right now, which is surprising. But I thank you all for your service and the things that you have done in Virginia, and that the things that we are going to all do together coming up this session, because I have no doubt in my mind that I will be working with all of you, and so I'm super excited for that. And the thing that I love about these ladies is that it's always from our voice. It's always about the community first, and it's not really where you can actually buy them to do anything at all if they don't believe in it truly. And so that's what I would say to people who are joining, is like, follow them on their social media platforms, and just listen to their priorities for legislation as well, and then step up and join advocacy that's in your area. We do advocacy all across the state, but it only takes a little bit of time for you to actually go out there, get on the ground, canvass, march, do whatever it is that you want to do. And if you don't think that you know how to advocate, reach out to us and we will tell you different ways that you can advocate in your area. And if you want a doula because you're pregnant, or because of you're trying to get pregnant, anything like that, reach out to us. We have plenty of doulas as well. We have the fatherhood program. So if there are fathers that want to be a part of advocacy, then they can definitely be a part of that. Across the state, I think mainly in Hampton Roads, if you are driving, look out for our register RJ to vote campaign that is on some billboards out there as well. So when you are thinking about voting, vote for RJ first. That's it. Thank you all for coming.
Everyone.
Thank you.